A 200-pound black Cane Corso spent the whole winter refusing to sleep anywhere except pressed against a baby girl's crib. Her mother thought it was sweet, maybe a little strange, until she scrolled back through the nursery camera one morning and saw what he does at exactly 3 a.m. And 3 weeks later, on the coldest night of the year, that one habit would be the only reason her daughter was still breathing at dawn. Claire Donovan never planned on having a dog, and she definitely never planned on a 200-pound one. She was 31, newly single, and had just moved into a drafty old farmhouse at the end of a gravel road outside Bozeman, Montana, with her 11-month-old daughter, Willow. The house was cheap because it was remote, and it was remote because nobody wanted to be that far up the valley when the snow came. The nearest hospital was a 25-minute drive, on a good day, longer when the ice came. Claire told herself she liked the quiet. She was lying. The quiet was the worst part. The couple who had rented the place before her had left in a hurry, and they had left something behind. On Claire's second day unpacking boxes in the freezing kitchen, she heard a sound from the barn. She found him there, in the dark, curled in a corner on a pile of old feed sacks, a massive black Cane Corso, ribs showing, water bowl frozen solid. The previous tenants had simply driven away and left him chained outside to fend for himself in a Montana October. She was afraid of him at first. Anyone would be. He was the size of a small pony with a head like an anvil and eyes that had watched the only people he knew disappear down the road. He had been out there at least 10 days, the vet later guessed, surviving on rainwater and whatever a chained dog can reach. I still see you haven't subscribed, and after a dog abandoned in an empty barn, that stings a little. Tap subscribe so the forgotten ones don't stay invisible. But he did not lunge and he did not bark. He lifted his huge head, looked at her for a long moment, and thumped his tail twice against the frozen floor, as if to ask whether she was staying or leaving like everyone else. Claire brought him inside. She named him Bruno. The vet in town put him at about 4 years old and nearly 25 pounds underweight, close to 175 pounds on a frame meant for 200, with frostbite starting on the tips of his ears. He should have been a hard dog, a wary dog after what people had done to him. He was not. From the moment Bruno walked into that farmhouse and saw Willow and her bouncer, something in him simply decided. This was his family now, and this baby was his job. Claire watched him like a hawk the first week, the way any mother would with a 200-pound dog and an infant under the same roof. She needn't have worried. Bruno moved around Willow like she was made of glass. When Claire gave the baby a bath, Bruno lay across the bathroom doorway. When Willow napped, Bruno lay beneath the crib. When she started to fuss in the night, Bruno was on his feet and at the crib rail before Claire had even pushed back the covers. He learned that baby's every sound faster than Claire did. A hiccup, a fuss, a single cough at 4 a.m., and Bruno was already at the crib, 200 pounds of silent black muscle, before Claire could get her feet on the cold floor. And Claire, who had not slept a full night since Willow was born, who lay awake in that big, empty house at 2 a.m., listening to the wind claw at the windows, finally slept. Because 200 pounds of dog breathing slow and steady on the nursery floor turned out to be the only thing that ever quieted her mind. She stopped listening for danger, because Bruno was already listening for her. The same dog people had left chained in a barn to freeze had appointed himself the night guard of a baby he had known just 6 days. Then came the habit. Claire had mounted a little camera in the nursery so she could check on Willow's naps from the kitchen. She mostly forgot it was there until one morning she scrolled back through the overnight clips to clear the full storage, and slowed down and stopped and watched the same stretch 3 times over. Every single night at exactly 3 a.m., Bruno would rise from the floor, stand up on his back legs with his front paws on the crib rail, and lower his enormous head down into the crib until his nose was almost touching Willow's chest. He would hold there, completely still, for a slow count of 10, feeling her breathe. Then he would drop back down and lie beside the crib until morning, every night, 3 a.m. Claire showed the clip to her mother on the phone, and they both laughed and called it his bed check. Neither of them understood yet that Bruno was not checking that Willow was asleep. He was checking that she was warm. 3 weeks later, the storm came. It was the kind of cold the valley only sees a few times a decade, 20 below zero with a wind that drove it deeper. Weather radio had warned of it for 2 days, a wall of Arctic air sliding down out of Canada. But Claire had a full tank of oil and a working furnace and no reason to worry. Sometime after midnight, the power lines went down under the ice, and the old furnace in the farmhouse died with them. No heat, no lights, no cell signal that far up the road. Within 40 minutes, the temperature inside the house had fallen below freezing. Claire was asleep under a heavy comforter and did not feel the temperature in the house begin to fall, degree by degree, toward the cold outside. Willow, in her thin sleeper in the crib down the hall, had no comforter and no way to tell anyone she was slipping into the dangerous, quiet cold that can take a baby before dawn without ever waking her. But Bruno felt it. At 3 a.m., Bruno did his bed check, and this time the small chest under his nose was too cold and too still. He did not lie back down. He crossed the dark hall to Claire's room, and he did something he had never once done. He drove his 200-pound body up onto her bed, barking full in her face, ripping the comforter off her with his teeth and dragging it toward the door. Claire came awake furious and confused, and then she felt the cold, the deep, wrong cold of a house with no heat, and her stomach dropped. She could see her own breath in the dark bedroom. The clock was dead, the vents were silent, and the whole house had gone as cold and still as the barn where Bruno had once been left to die. She followed Bruno running to the nursery. Willow was pale and limp and barely responsive, her little hands ice cold. Her body temperature, the doctors would measure an hour later, had dropped to 93 degrees, and another 4 or 5 would have been past the point of return. Claire did everything right because Bruno had bought her the minutes to do it. She stripped off the cold sleeper and pressed the baby skin to skin against her own chest, wrapped them both in the comforter Bruno had dragged from her bed, and half ran, half slid the truck out onto the frozen road toward town with the heater roaring. The doctors in Bozeman said Willow had been within 1 hour, maybe less, of something they would not have been able to undo. They asked what had woken Claire in time. She looked down at the black dog leaning against her leg in the waiting room and said, "He did. He knew she was cold before I did." The same dog someone had chained in a barn and left to freeze had spent every night of that winter making sure a baby never froze the way he almost had. Today, Willow is 3 years old, and Bruno still does his bed check every night at 3 a.m., front paws on the rail, nose to her chest, counting to 10. Claire doesn't lie awake in that big house anymore. She just listens for the soft thud of a big body rising in the dark, and she sleeps. Was it just a habit, or did a dog who nearly froze to death know exactly what cold can do to something small and helpless? Tell me what you think in the comments. And if a dog the world gave up on ever saved someone you love, say their name below. Someone scrolling alone tonight needs to hear it.